Hi there, welcome to my video. Today I'm going to teach you how I do my automotive backplate renders in Blender. Before we start with anything, I'm just going to go over some factors that can contribute into the final product of what you're going to make, and how you can achieve a better or more, as they say, photorealistic render. Keep in mind, I'm not like a professional or anything. I just do all of this for fun. I'm just a car nerd, and I don't have an actual camera to go out and do automotive photography. So I do it in Blender. I do it in 3D, which is it's a very capable program. So, but yeah, the first thing, model quality and the backplate quality. You're gonna want a model that's pretty decent when it comes to details, poly count. You don't want your you don't want a Roblox model or something like that. Though they are getting pretty good, but you don't want something low poly in what is basically a real background. For backplate quality, you're gonna want something that's high resolution, preferably as high as you can get, because you can always scale it down, but you can't really upscale something. You lose detail either way, but just try to start with something nice. I'll put in the description some places where you can find some nice backplates that you can either pay for, or some free options as well. Second factor that plays a big role in the quality of your render is the quality of your materials. And I would say lighting, but oftentimes for backplates it's done with an HDRI or an HDR or something like that, so it's not as important. But yeah, qualities, using like PBR textures when possible for some things like plastics, carbon fiber, metals, things like that. Though you can make those procedurally as well, and then you also have more customization. But it's kind of you have to adjust it to kind of every scene. It's never going to be just plug and play. And also take into account that having, like, depending on your scene, having a completely clean car is not always realistic. If you're off-roading, or if your scene is of an off-roading truck or something, in some mud, you don't want it to look showroom new. You're gonna want some wear on it, and it's those kind of smaller things that gonna give you that last 5 to 10% of realism. So yeah, and also using real values for things like index of reflection, roughness, stuff like that. That can also kind of take it to the next step. My third point is context. So kind of the color of everything in your scene, the color of the car, in relation to the background. When using backplates, composition is kind of, it's not, I wouldn't say unimportant, but we don't have much control over it because it's not like a full CGI 3D environment where you can kind of really choose where you place your camera or whatever. That comes in choosing the correct kind of backplate. Normally when you find a backplate, it comes in a set with multiple angles and stuff, and you can kind of choose and play around with that. So choosing something like that is important. And also making sure the subject is appropriate for the background. Like I said, if previously, if you're off-roading, you're not going to have a supercar or something like that wouldn't fit. You want it to be feasible. You want to ask yourself if this is a real scene, like if it's a possible scene and doesn't make sense. So yeah, those are the factors that I would say play a pretty big role, things that you want to consider when choosing the car model, like the subject, and the backplate, what you're gonna have. All right, so now we're ready to actually start making the render. So what you want to start with first is you're gonna want to add your HDRI in, and this HDRI is not gonna be used for the background, but more for the lighting. So you're gonna go over to the world properties here, click on color, environment, texture, and then just open your HDRI. Now I've got mine saved here, so I'm just gonna drag it in, open image, and then if you go to render view, you should be able to see it. Yeah. So this one's a little bit dark. Sometimes that just happens, so you can turn the strength up. I think I used 5 for mine. Just get rid of that. So yeah, this looks pretty good. So just leave that. Sorry if my computer is really loud. I'm just on a laptop here, but so now we can add the camera. So to do that, Shift A, camera, just a regular old camera, it doesn't really matter. You're going to want to go to the camera properties here. And then you're going to want to match the focal length and the aperture to the backplate that you're using. So mine is over here, this one. So you go to properties, details, and then here you have all the properties. You're also going to want to match the resolution to your render resolution. So it was 3840 by 2560, which is a little bit higher than 4K. It's fine. What you're going to want to do, focal length. Look for the focal length here, 49 millimeters, and the aperture is an f10. So 49. Then go to here. Depth of field, you're going to want to check that. I've got some extra options because I have the photographer add-on. Just ignore them. You should have these 4 and this general box as well. And then here, check background images, add image, open where that image file is. And then so if you go into the camera view by hitting 0, you can see it now. And you can turn the opacity up to get a better view. So this is where you're going to basically base your render off of. So now you need to add the shadow catcher or the ground plane. And so to do that, really simple. You just move that camera a little bit. It's just a plane. Just scale that up a little bit. You won't really know how big that'll need to be until you have your model loaded in and the shadows and stuff like that. You see where the shadows need to go. And to do this, to make a shadow catcher, you're going to give it a texture. But first, come in here to Object Properties, Visibility, and turn on Shadow Catcher. Basically, that makes it invisible to a camera, but it can still reflect onto other objects when light bounces off of it, and it'll also catch the shadow, in the name. So, add a material. Color doesn't matter as we'll be using the backplate for the color, but just set the roughness to 100 and the specular to 0. The roughness kind of depends on what surface you're trying to replicate. So in this one, it's just gravel, so it's not very reflective. So you can have the roughness high. Sometimes if the reflections are a bit bright on the car or whatever you're making a backplate of, you can go to Coat, turn the weight up and the roughness up, and then just set this value to something darker or lighter. But for this backplate, it's fine. Since this is pretty white, so I don't need to adjust that. So then what you want to do, with Node Wrangler enabled, which you can just find here, just an add-on that comes with Blender, click on your principled BSDF and then hit Control-T, and that brings up this. Then here you just want to add your backplate as the image texture. You might think that's weird because if you look at this, it's just the image. But you'll have to change your texture coordinate here to window. So now if you look, it basically projects the view from the viewport, or in the final render, the camera, onto the ground. So you see, if I just move this, you can kind of see how you can get it to match up, right? And this is quite helpful for matching the perspective, but also just for providing correct reflections. So that's the ground and shadow catcher done. What you can do now is to add the model. So I'm just going to append that. I have it saved here. It's the GT3 RS that I had, that you saw in the example. So there you go. It's a little bit small, but maybe we can scale this down a little bit. Doesn't really matter, but so now the hard part is matching everything. And so you can see, if you go into render view, you have lighting and everything, but it doesn't really sit right, And so first what you'll have to do, I kind of forgot to say, But go over to your render properties, go over to film, and then turn on transparent and transparent glass. So you just get this. Basically, it'll render out as a PNG. But you see, like, if I just turn this off, the position where this HDRI was taken, or where the camera was positioned, is in the middle of this dirt lot. But if you look at the backplate, there's this like wall here. That is being shot from right here. So this angle is basically in this direction, kind of horizontal to the right and diagonal down. So we'll want to match the lighting. And to do that, you go to your world, I guess, material properties, hover or click on the HDR environment texture and hit Control T like previously with the Node Wrangler. And here you can rotate it around the Z-axis. And what you want to do is you want to rotate it so that the view is matching what you see through the backplate. And the camera or the HDRI origin is not here, which makes it a little bit more tricky, but what you can do to help is just to match shadows. So you see that the shadows kind of move to the right. You can do that as well. Let me just orient the camera correctly, kind of to where I'd like the car to be, you know, just something quick and dirty, something like, I don't know, something like that. Just, we'll fix that later, but just to be able to see where the shadows are. And so here, you see the shadow is going the wrong way, you know. Here it's going to the left, in the background it's going to the right. So you just kind of want to rotate that until it kind of matches up. So something like, and you'll see in the background as well, this is from the backplate and this is from the HDRI. You can kind of see it start to match a little bit. It's just really playing around. There's not like a concrete way to do this. Yeah, something like that maybe. That looks good. So that's kind of it set up, or the lighting setup. So you can go back to your render properties here and then recheck transparent and transparent glass. And there you go. That was kind of a rudimentary kind of aligning of perspective, but it doesn't look terrible. You can obviously tweak this. You can do that by just clicking the camera and hitting G and, you know, transforming on the axes. Or what I usually prefer to do is if you hit N to bring up your toolbar, or I guess your right toolbar, you can check this camera to view, which will basically lock the camera to what you're looking at. So as if the camera is the viewport. And so with this, if you click on a part of the car, you can rotate around it. And that way you can kind of position the car in a way that makes sense. And if you zoom in, it makes it bigger. You zoom out, it makes it smaller. It's not the most accurate way to do it, but it can work. And for lateral movements, I kind of tend to just click on the camera and use the G and X, like G, Y, and GX to move along those axes. But yeah, something like that doesn't look terrible. Maybe angle it up a tiny bit. You can also use the shadow catcher to help line that up. So if you go into edge mode and just kind of extend this, extend it that way, you can see this kind of, you can try to get it to line up with the line of the grass, which won't be straight, as it's grass, it's natural, it's not going to be straight, but you can use that somewhat as a reference point. So something like, you know, something like that maybe, or something like that. Yeah, that doesn't look terrible. Just make sure to uncheck this before you move your viewport around if you don't want to move it. Otherwise, you're going to lose the position you had. So yeah, so now here you can position the car any way you want. I have the tire or the wheels bounded to the, or parented to the tires. So if I want to, you know, rotate them, I just hit R double Z. Make sure it's around the individual transform origins, and then you can, you know, I think in the other render I had them turned a little bit, and then angled a little bit like that. So yeah, something like that. You can also select the car, and then not the ground included. Just select the car. Let me make sure the camera's not in there either. Select the car, and then just kind of clip it into the ground a little bit, just so it seems like it's got weight on the tires, because the car is not going to sit perfectly flat on the wheels, it'll sink into the ground, and especially on a looser surface like gravel, it'll make kind of an imprint. But yeah, you kind of get that, which doesn't look terrible actually. And then, in the compositor, what I usually do, I've got this denoise setup, which you can use as well, but I always like to add a glare node. Set it to fog glow and then high. And then if you add a viewer node and hook that up here and click backdrop, after a render, you'll get like a preview image here, and then you can see the changes that you make. So I can show that real quick. I'm just going to hit F12, and I'll be back once this is done rendering. All right, so it's finished rendering, and as you can see now, there is glare. It's a little bit strong, so what you can do, just minimize that. You come back to here. You have the viewer node set up, so if you hit backdrop, now you can see a preview. And you can move the preview around with Alt and middle click. And you can zoom in or zoom out with V, and zoom in with Alt V. So any change you make to the compositor here, you'll be able to see. So if I find this glare is too strong, I can just turn the size down, or I can mess with the threshold. I like where the glare is at, so I'm not going to mess with the threshold, but I'll just turn down the size to 7 and see how that looks. Sometimes it can take a while to composite. It's a pretty high resolution image, but there you go. That looks good. I like that. There's not that much that you have to do if you have everything set up, and as you can see, you have reflections. You have the pebbles reflected on the paint. It's properly dark in the places where where it should be dark, where the shadows are casted the most, and you have nice light. So that's basically it. Once you render this out, you take a look at the render, it's a PNG. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to put it in whatever photo editing software that you use. I use Photoshop. You'll take your backplate, chuck that in as a background layer, and then chuck this on top of it. And it should match up. If you have the resolution set correctly in the render, the focal length, the aperture, everything set, it should look good. It should match up. It should look like this basically. And then from there you can modify the image. And sometimes the shadows in the backplates are a little bit softer, so you can go ahead and add like a Gaussian blur or something like that. Normally you could do that in Blender if you have like a sky texture where you actually have a sun lamp. You could just decrease or increase the size of the sun lamp, but with an HDRI you don't really have that option. But then also pay attention to things like these. Like this, from where my cursor is, the right side of the shadow should not be visible because this wall should be in front of it. So in post, you'll have to cut that out. And same thing with curbs. If you have a curb that kind of goes up, you're going to want to model like a little bit of the geometry. So say you have a curb on this edge, you just want to extrude it up and then maybe extrude it on the x-axis so that your shadow looks correct. Otherwise, your shadow is going to be cast as if there's no difference in height on the ground, which is not true. There is, because there's the curb. So just look out for things like that. But yeah, that's basically how to do it. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments. You can also DM me on Instagram. I'll have that linked down below. And yeah, I hope this helped. I will see you next time.